This lesson is over perfect squares and square roots. So when an integer is multiplied by itself, it is called a perfect square. For example, 3 squared means 3 times 3, which is equal to 9. It does not mean 3 times 2. You will be responsible for memorizing many of the most common perfect squares. This will help you in several concepts, especially when we get to the Pythagorean theorem in 8th grade. So we're going to write an expression in standard form, then simplify. Standard form just means write it out. Sometimes this is also called expanded form. Actually, sorry. Standard form is the answer. This should say write it in expanded form, which means we're going to write what it is we're going to simplify. And our answer is actually the same thing as standard form. So let me make that correction real quick. So 9 squared means 9 times 9. This is expanded form. Standard form is the answer. Now this one's a little bit tricky, and you need to make sure that you're aware of it because it does show up all the time. This squared is touching the whole parenthesis, which means everything in the parenthesis gets written twice, even the negative. Now that may seem like, duh, well, of course that makes sense. Well, when we get to the next one, it'll make a little bit more sense why we do it that way. So 49 would be your standard form. On the next one, we're doing 1.1, sorry, let me write it down here, times 1.1. Now, I know 11 times 11 is 121, and there's 2 decimal places, so that's how I came up with my answer. But please remember, you're more than welcome to go over to the side and do a little side math. So 1 squared means, or sorry, 1/2 squared means 1/2 times 1/2. Now, I know we haven't especially covered multiplying fractions yet, but this part just means 1 times 1 and 2 times 2. So you're going to multiply the tops and multiply the bottoms. If that's tough, if you have a trouble remembering that, please remember that 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So you could also write 0.5 times 0.5 as your expanded form. And I would accept 0.25 as your answer. These are the same things. All right, so this is the reason that we will be doing this, because we will be doing more problems involving order of operations that have exponents this year. So this is the level of difficulty you should be comfortable with. So we're always going to start in the parentheses first. -8 plus 11 is going to be 3. Now the exponent is touching the parenthesis, so everything in the parenthesis gets squared. So this means 3 times 3, which is 9. Okay, and don't forget that this whole thing was divided by 2. So this was the step I just did. Now I'm going to do the 5 minus 9. It's probably a good idea to do your add the opposite so that you don't mess up with the integers. So 5 plus -9 is -4. This was the step I just did. And then -4 divided by 2 is -2. This says a square kitchen tile has sides measuring, I'm going to change the color so you can see it a little better, 12 inches. And we want to know the amount of space, so all of this, each tile covers. Well, that's area. So to find area, we're going to do 12 times 12, which is the same thing as 12 squared, which gives us an answer of 144 inches squared. That is a very common square root, and square, and we don't want to have to be doing that all over on the side all the time. So please make sure that you have some of these commonly used ones memorized. Now, the square root of a number is that the number multiplied by itself, which equals n. Okay, so crazy. Let's just look at what it means because it's a little easier when you actually see it in an example. So you know that 8 squared means 8 times 8, which equals 64. Therefore, the square root of 64, which is most of the time written like this, equals 8. It also equals negative 8, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But typically, we're going to be dealing with the positive square root. So let's talk about this again. This means square root of 64. And when we're looking for the square root, we're looking for the number times itself that gave us 64. So it's almost like working backwards. 8 squared equals 64. So if we want to know the square root of 64, it's like we're asking what number did we square. So 8 is that square root. Now let's go back to that negative 8. Why did I say negative 8 works? Well, if you remember your integers, negative 8 times negative 8 is also a positive 64. So technically, both of these answers work. Let's try some more. Square root of 100. Now, we're only going to be doing the positive square root, which is also known as the principal square root. So that means we're ignoring the negative for now. So what number times itself gives you 100? That would be 10. So the answer to this problem is 10. Not 10 squared, just 10. What number times itself gives you 625? That would be 25. Again, a very common one that you should make an effort to know. What number times itself gives you 169? 13. Another very common one that you should make an effort to know. Which model represents 9 squared? Now this is a very common question to see on our state tests, so you might want to make sure that you're aware of it. Now remember, this means 9 times 9, not 9 times 2. So this one should automatically be off because it just looks kind of funky. This is 2, and this is 9. Did we say that it was 9 times 2? Negative, so that one's out. This is 9 and 9. That looks like 9 times 9. Isn't 9 times 9 81? How many squares are here? 81. And this is 1 times 9, so that should have been one that we crossed off immediately. So my answer here is G. Historic Route 66 from Chicago to Los Angeles is known as the Main Street of America. If the area of the Route 66 sign measures 576 square inches and the sign is a square, what are the dimensions of the sign? So basically it's asking me what number times what number equals the area of this sign. Now remember, with a square, we multiply this times this to get that. So that should be a clue that we are working backwards. So when you're talking about two numbers squared, a number squared to get something, and we're working backwards, that's telling you you're doing square root. And the square root of 576 is 24. Now this is one that's commonly used as well, but you may not always remember it. So sometimes you'll get these numbers and you'll have to kind of just spend a little bit of time multiplying two numbers together to come up with the one that works. Use estimating to figure that out. If you knew that 625 was 25 by 25 and you knew that 20 by 20 was 400, you should kind of be able to figure out what number it would be close to using that information. You definitely will see a question like this where I give you the area and ask you to work backwards again. All right, so that's all we have for today. Please look behind your notes in your math booklet for your homework.